In today's video, we're going to be going over float steps, also commonly known as scissor steps. So a float step can be defined as a step that you begin to take but then interrupt before getting into a different footwork. This often involves swinging the incompleted step's leg backwards in a scissoring motion, which is where the scissor step terminology comes from. However, we use the term float step because the incompleted step does not necessarily have to swing back in the scissoring motion. As we can see right here, Kyrie begins his step floating in the air and then reinitiates his footwork into a split through the legs instead of a scissoring motion. Our first and most common option out of a float step is to reinitiate that incomplete step into a dig step, which drives downward and backwards into the ground for the purpose of accelerating. This is definitely a favorite move of LeBron James and Kyrie Irving for either hesitating and blowing by the defense or getting them on their heels in order to rise up for their shot. Our second option out of our float step is going to be to scissor that leg back into our drop stance for a crossover. Here we can see Kyrie use that float step into his drop to sell that he's going to use the screen. When his defender jumps over, he quickly counters with his crossover. This move is really great for selling the drive because the float step and subsequent scissoring motion creates the illusion of you taking off into a running start. This, of course, is going to get the defender to shift, and then you can counter with a crossover in order to change directions and go the other way. Our next float step option is going to be scissoring into our split stance for a Shammgod cross. The float step scissor into the Shammgod is the original footwork that God Shammgod used when he popularized this move. It's often been said that no one can do the Shammgod quite like God Shammgod did it, and part of that's because of the lack of attention to footwork detail. We've seen tons of people try to replicate the release of the ball and then pulling it across the body, but very few players have the correct footwork that goes along with the move that really makes it so shifty. I went through a lot of NBA game film, and this clip of Chris Paul is the only one where I could find the float step scissor footwork paired with the Shammgod correctly. This is not to say that other players who use the Shammgod and don't do this footwork are doing it wrong. If it works, it works. But the float step scissor split footwork definitely adds another degree of shiftiness which can be used to react to or set up the defense. Our fourth option out of our float step is to scissor into our drop and then step into our shot. This option is best for the read where the defense begins to retreat, seeing you set up for a drive, and then you simply step into your shot. Our final option out of a float step is going to be a drag under dribble. This option should really begin with the intent to drive, but then when you see the defender begin to retreat, you can drag that ball under the legs and then either get into your shot or do a foot switch in order to drive to the other direction. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, keep working on your game.